Alec Holmes is courageously stepping up and out of traditional systems and trajectories suggested by societal status quo. We talk about it in this gold conversation.
Hi, Susan. Thank you for inviting me. So just a quick intro. I'm Alec. I started the Arts of Thought project back in 2017 when I was a senior in college studying psychology. Arts of Thought is a website, kind of a platform dedicated to sharing interesting thinkers and thoughts, different ideas from around the planet. So it was originally based in psychology, but it's naturally grown to embrace topics and life experiences, such as like near-death experiences, even kind of venturing into the psychedelic realm a little bit, and then different spiritual awakening type topics. So it's definitely a diverse website, and it's dedicated to sharing written content. So something that's a little bit more risky nowadays with all the fancy media coming out. So we're doing our best to stay traditional and stick with written content. So you'll see a lot of blog posts and poetry coming from that platform.
Yeah, the latest article came into my inbox this morning and it was profound. It was so well written and just exquisitely beautiful. And I love that you can't even taste a lick of AI in any portion of the platform. So thanks for putting that out. But we're gonna rewind. Let's go back to your childhood. I've heard you talk in other interviews that you were a little set apart from others. How did you recognize that yourself and describe that a little bit for us?
I kind of narrowed my life down to having an identity crisis with baseball because I grew up from ever since a young age. I think 5 years old, I started playing baseball. So I played t-ball every year, every summer in Texas. I grew up, and my identity was completely based around playing baseball. And I was good at it. I got respect. It was just a wholesome life up until my teenage years in high school, where I wasn't able to play anymore due to an injury. And I sort of had like a slight like teenage identity crisis, I guess. And it took me maybe 10 years to kind of reclaim an identity because I had been lost for so long. So in that, there was a lot of journeys and self-discoveries to be made. But ultimately, I kind of went on a path of seeking self-development and self-actualization. So a lot of inner work. And then that kind of turbocharged when I began studying psychology in college. So that's kind of like a little snapshot of the trajectory, I think, what you're getting at there. And then of course it kind of blossomed into entrepreneurship, and just a journey of self-discovery, I would say.
You could have gone the status quo route essentially if it weren't for that injury. It sounds like that injury was really the blossoming for you to sort of dig a little bit deeper on who you really are and were. With that component comes a real intuitive piece, like the ability to really recognize your intuition, your inner kind of dialogue, and that rich life that goes on within that I feel is where everything is being done to like sugarcoat that, candy coat it, stomp it down, stomp it out. Can you talk a little bit about your intuitive process? When did you recognize that? When did you wake up to that? And how has that impacted your
Yeah,
trajectory?
yeah, good question. So I think the biggest factor in my life is something that I began developing. I think once I discovered meditation and kind of looking inwards more is the power of intuition. And I know a lot of your work is centered around intuition. You also contributed a beautiful piece to Arts of Thought. So I'd recommend anyone listening to check out your article on Arts of Thought. Very powerful there. But yeah, as far as intuition, I think when we're feeling lost in life, so, for example, when I had that sort of identity crisis, that was where I associated my identity, and there was no call, no guidance, kind of a ship without a compass. So I began to listen to the intuitive voice, which is sort of a whisper, and I think the intuition is sort of the authentic voice of God, or it is. So when you begin to develop your capacity for listening to your intuition and saying yes to it, you'll find yourself taking really interesting life paths that might look scary at first, but when you listen to that voice, it leads to a lot greater fruits. But it takes courage to be able to listen to that. And I think that's kind of the essence of these sorts of awakenings or these abrupt transitions in life paths is when you start listening to that intuitive voice, and discovering that it leads you to greater and better things. So the more you practice that, the more you trust it, and then the higher it'll take you. So
So describe that playing out because I know you didn't start out as a psychology major. I think you were a history major at
yeah.
first.
Mhm.
So how did you move out of that and into psychology, and what was the path there? And I know you didn't have the traditional 4-year trajectory.
Yeah, yeah, good question. It's funny you caught that. Yeah, I did start out as a history major. That didn't last long. But so I trace it back through school, because in school in the US, I grew up in Texas, in the public school system. We're taught very objective sciences, and we're constantly looking outwards. We're looking at history, we're looking at biology, we're looking at chemistry. We're always looking out. And there was nothing in school that really allowed me to look inwards. So it was a completely neglected space. And it wasn't until I took my first psychology class, which was theories of personality, that they began talking about the inner world. So they were giving the inner world different words. There's different theories associated with it. There's different maps of it. So I was like, wow, this is actually something people think about. And that really sparked my curiosity from that point on. And that led me in a kind of a deep journey into exploring the inner spaces based in psychology, mysticism, and a lot of different religions. So yeah, it opened up the doorways to the inner world. So that's what sparked that motivation to pursue.
And I
Um,
think it's so profound that, right, you grew up in this sort of traditional system of schooling. Like it wasn't really about you and your process. You're right. It was about the exterior, the outside. And then somehow you found the inside going through a collegiate track. But the way you describe it, it just blew me away. Like you would get carried away and involved really from your heart. About the study, the readings you were doing, and it had nothing to do with what the profs were assigning. So you sort of just follow your soul, which is profound to me. And I really hope that that kind of path comes into play in our educational system as we start to evolve, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, totally. And I think on that note, it did take me 6 years to get through my bachelor's degree, so quite some time. But in psychology, we'd often find topics that I'd be particularly interested in because it wasn't just studying for me, it was like uncovering these secrets of life that you could apply and get results from. So what really piqued my interest in the beginning was Abraham Maslow's idea of self-actualization. So it's the pyramid, and it kind of has all the basis you need to get to the top point. I was like, how do we get to that top point? What is that top point? What is it like to get there? Because I was in a deep state of suffering. But as I begin to get out of my own inner sufferings, there's higher and higher levels to the game. So not only can you feel content, but you can extend your inner world to change the outer world. And once I began noticing that, that's when it got really interesting for me. So it was just a hunger for these topics, and then kind of taking them and then applying them and see what happens. Um,
It sounds like you found a healthy law of attraction theory for yourself.
sure, yeah.
Where that was like even the chic thing. So okay, so you get out of school. You mentioned you took a 6-year trajectory through it. Like, what was, did you go looking for a job? Did you go travel? Like, what was your path after?
So we traveled. This was kind of the first point in my life where I realized that sometimes if you have an idea, the world might not necessarily support it, and typically they'll go against it. So my girlfriend at the time, and we wanted to do a driving trip around the United States. So we planned it out. We did a dream board, and we kind of mapped out all the different points that we would go to in the United States, and then we'd go over to Europe. So to everyone, like, that's crazy. You need to get a job. Like, you need to get your momentum going because you just graduated college. So you should start applying and all that. But we decided we're going to stick with it despite all the negative pressure we were getting from our family, from our friends. So yeah, it was risky. You know, we didn't have any money. Maybe we had like 1,500 bucks together. But we ended up selling all of our items in the house that we had accumulated through college. So we saved up a bit more, and then we ended up doing the trip around the U.S., and it was amazing. So like we started in Texas, went around the East Coast, the North Side through Montana, through Oregon, California, and then back around, and then went over to Switzerland. But it was cool because we got to see family, and there were like all these crazy synchronicities that happened during the trip. And these rewards and the people we met, and we created a whole blog and a story off of it and met new people. So I think from that point, I began to realize that if you take the path that requires courage, it usually leads to more beautiful things than just being scared and taking a safe route. So ultimately, yeah, that trip was amazing. it's something I'd be happy to take to my deathbed, and that's how I look at a lot of things.
Yeah,
Um,
there's so much sovereignty and freedom in that
mhm,
expression of life. And you're right, we are, most of us, terrified of that.
mhm.
So what happened when you came back?
So came back, just another kind of test of the unknown. We came back to my girlfriend, fiance, when we got back because I proposed to her in Germany. I had this big idea of proposing in the Neuschwanstein Castle. It's the one that Disney's based off of. So it's just this crazy idea, but I like to put big ideas to the test, and ended up happening. I had to coordinate it with some German lady. She had to like fix it with the government to allow us to do this, and the things just kind of fell into place, and it was a beautiful proposal in the castle in the throne room. So she got her ring, and we came back. Sorry to, I just had to throw that in there, but we came back to Texas at the end of the trip, and we had a travel trailer. No, actually, we didn't even have a travel trailer at the point. We used the rest of our money to purchase a travel trailer, and we just picked a destination. And we both love Northern California, the redwoods. So we decided to kind of drive up to Redding in the trailer and then figure it out in California. Then we eventually, I got a job with the hospital system, and then we grew it from there. Um, but now we live on a farm on 40 acres in beautiful Mendocino County, fully off grid. So it's a crazy trajectory. Yeah, so lots of details there. But if you want me to touch on anything in particular,
I want you to go back to the hospital system because, like,
yeah.
how does a guy that's been traveling around the globe essentially come back and like go into the hospital system? I have to ask you that.
Yeah, good question. So I was still kind of in the program of like I need to get a job, I need to get my 401k, get all my benefits. I was still in that mode. I wasn't quite cracked out of it yet at that point. So I was actually very grateful to get a job with the hospital system in corporate because I had worked as a phlebotomist through college in a hospital. So I got to see the nurses and everyone work together, which I liked. And it was a good job. It was corporate. I was doing recruitment for the local hospital system here. And it went well up until COVID. And then kind of the tentacles started coming out. I got laid off and I realized like this isn't a very secure life that as they made it seem. Um, so that was kind of what happened with the hospital. So it was going good, and then COVID kind of made things weird, and that's kind of got me started questioning like, is this truly the life I want? Um,
Yeah, because it's what we're told makes us happy. I mean, my son was flipped out. He graduated in 3 years out of college and expects to get a job overnight. Well, within 6 weeks, he got a career. It's like
mhm,
a government job. And he's already figuring out like when he can retire and what he's going to retire with. This is so the opposite of me. I can't, I don't even know, know how. And my sister's the same, like corporate princess her whole career. But I have to ask you, like, when COVID woke you up,
mhm,
essentially what was that for you? Because a lot of us did wake up during COVID,
mhm.
but we just sort of got jumbled by the next right action.
Yeah.
That's where you are different. You take the next right action regardless.
Mhm.
So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so at that point, once I got laid off, I panicked like most people would, and I tried scrapping for another job, and I realized like my livelihood, my income, which I had placed great significance on, is based to a job. So I ended up kind of moving around. I got an HR job in the area, but I sort of knew at the time, like I know this might not be permanent. So I think around that time we started creating side incomes, side businesses, just kind of building like a little life raft, not only to help save up for a house, but just in case something happened because something had already happened. So I started trading small cap listed stocks. Doing that. And then I created another website for affiliate work and then put a lot of effort into Arts of Thought. So those were kind of this, oh yeah, and then reselling and e-commerce things. But yeah, so rather than give my 100% of my focus to a job, I kind of like maybe gave like 50% of that and then put the rest on building a little life raft. And ultimately that life raft grew into something greater and then helped us get to where we are today. Um,
Which is living on a farm in Northern California off grid.
yes.
Like it sounds glorious, But when you get in and you really look at it, how is it going?
I love it. It's amazing. So I like it primarily because this is a vision I had when I was younger to live in Northern California, with the redwoods. So for it to have happened is quite amazing. So I'm grateful every day that I see it and get to look outside and hear the chickens making noises and whatnot. So very grateful for that. As far as like the tech and learning solar, there's been a lot of challenges, but it's ultimately amazing. I love it so far, and it's a lot more peaceful. What I want is peace. I want to just be able to sit down and be at peace. I don't need the materialistic type stuff to be happy. I just want peace, and that's sort of the path we've been on, is creating an environment to where we can have an abundance of peace.
From the outside looking in, it seems like you're living a very rich life, like emboldened life. And I have to say, there's something very psychic about you because you had this premonition when you were young and now you're living it. Same thing happened with me. I wanted to get out of my tiny town and go to New York City as soon as possible. And I wanted to be like Barbara Walters.
Mhm.
So I got out of my town really pretty quickly and went to the big city. And I didn't become Barbara Walters, but I became her exercise trainer. So
Mhm. Okay.
sort of an interesting, and I think that we don't realize these psychic abilities that we have as human beings because we're so busy getting that job that's going to make us okay and provide for it. So it's just mind blowing that you have the wherewithal. Is that just ingrained, do you think, or do you think that's teachable, or do you think that's endemic to who we are as beings, where it's just trained out of us by the systemization that our culture's bred that may not be the healthiest? What's your thought on that?
That's a good question. Deep question. So I think what I condense it down to is I think all of us are seeking alignment, whether we realize it or not. So we tend to know subconsciously, even consciously, that we're doing something that's not in alignment with who we are. So I think the system, schooling, and everything does take us away from being in touch with our authentic self. But if you're a person who begins seeking alignment, with your income, with your lifestyle, with things that resonate with you the most. And if you stick to that path, those things sort of start gravitating towards you. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's ingrained. I think it takes courage to start testing that path. But I found when I test that, listen to the intuition and step into the unknown, typically better things come into your life. So I think I have faith in approaching those things. So it's not necessarily ingrained. It's just a strengthening of faith.
And it,
Uh,
it sounds also like a trust has been built up. Certainly, since you lost your identity as a baseballer,
mhm,
you've had to come to trust your instincts, obviously your intuition, your path, your visions, and then as a result of the success, repeated, even if it doesn't seem like you're successful, maybe by an outside measure, who knows? Um,
mhm.
but it seems like that trust is also key as well.
Sure. Yeah, and I think just coming, I read a bunch of Neville Goddard. I don't know if you've
Oh yeah.
heard that name. I love that guy. I think his practices are amazing. Um, Kind of on the mystic side, if you're not familiar with Neville Goddard, but just these practices of using your mind to imagine things, and then having the trust and faith that they will actualize if you can imagine them in enough detail. So it's a practice I've used along with prayer. I trust in God, a higher power. I don't think it's all me doing it. I think that's kind of funny when people say that. But if you can imagine it, and if you know what you want, and you can put the inputs in to get towards those things, usually you'll see evidence of it come about. And if you stick with it and have persistence and dedication, those things typically manifest for you.
Now
Um,
let's go to arts of thought because it's amazing that you've kept this up since 2013 or 17. It's a labor of
mhm.
love, yes? It's or is it an income producing? It doesn't feel like it's got any kind of.
Yeah. So the spirit of arts of thought, it's not designed to be an income producing machine. It does get traffic, but the primary essence of arts of thought is to be authentic and comfortable and to truly resonate with readers and people who visit the site. So we all know when we go to a website and we get bombarded with ads and things, you want to get off of it quickly. So Arts of Thought is testing a theory that people resonate with authenticity. And the written word is also powerful. So you can look at like poetry and things like that. But keeping the spirit of authenticity is the essence of it. And then when like you do ads or try to make money off of it, it kind of gets in the way of that feel. So for me, yes, Arts of Thought is a soul project. It's a project of love. I have other income producing projects, but definitely not Arts of Thought. It's just something I want to grow organically and create sort of a community of authentic individuals who are sort of on the same life path and like to learn about these things. So that's the ultimate currency for me with Arts of Thought is the network and the people I get to meet and the synergies and symbiosis we get to have through our mutual projects. So like this came about through Arts of Thought, and this is something that I value. Speaking with you here.
Oh, me too. I came across it through another friend. Um, and I was blown away, like the feel of it, the authenticity, and that there was nothing there. You didn't want anything. Like I was expecting, okay, there's going to be some hidden agenda,
Mhm.
and there just wasn't. And you feel that, and you feel it going into the articles that live on the site and the poetry. So, hats off to you.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
this is enough. I just had a short conversation and I'm just thrilled. It's a privilege to meet you. I'm so glad my audience will have this opportunity and to check out Arts of Thought too. And just thank you for sharing your unique path. And I have a hope and a desire that more and more of us are following the same.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate it. And anyone listening that wants to reach out, you can find me through Arts of Thought. Just reach out on the contact page, and I'll get to you there. So I know you also have wonderful coaching service. So if anyone's facing any particular struggles, I definitely suggest that they reach out to you too. So yeah, I look forward to producing more content, and I hope you guys can subscribe and catch the new articles that come out.
Thanks, Alec.
Yep. Thank you.